We got some teddy bears to talk about and some drafting. You'll know what I mean as it's time for another episode of Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to another episode of my Calgary Hitmen 6. And we're up to Season 4, Episode number 5. As we'll talk about and recap how Games 19 to 24 went during the 2021-2022 WHL Regular season with our Calgary Hitmen, our junior hockey team. Before I get into my notes, as I tee it up, we'll talk about the teddy bear toss game, how many teddy bears were tossed, and there was no trades, but a couple drafts occurred as the Calgary Hitmen had their prospects draft to select their next crop of talent. So before I get into my notes, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, just make sure you hit like and subscribe, as I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, and I do have my second channel in Brett Hornby Shorts, where I exclusively put my short form content on there. So say I was a little busy the last couple days when this episode was ready, between Grey Cup Sunday and taking some time off for the weekend for said Grey Cup. So here I finally am, and of course timestamps are in the description below for when I jump to any particular games or segments. So now, if you flash back to Game 19, to start off this episode, this happened on Thursday, December the 2nd, as the Calgary Hitmen, they were at home hosting the Moose Jaw Warriors. This was a 7 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome, and the Calgary Hitmen got off to a fast start. First goal past the 2.5 minute mark, as it was Tyson Galloway who scored his third of the season to make it 1-0 for Calgary. Calgary added two more midway in the period. Zach Funk scored his sixth just past the 10 minute mark, and then Sean Chagall scored his 13th 55 seconds later. So Calgary had a 3-0 lead roughly in the just past the midway point of the first period. Calgary got their fourth goal of the period, as it was Sean Chagall who got his second of the game and the period as well, with 25 seconds to go in the first period. So Calgary had a early healthy 4-0 lead after the first period. Second period, Calgary continued to add to their lead. First it was Cale Zimmerman, who scored his fifth of the season at the 4.5 minute mark to make it 5-0 for Calgary. Brandon Wynot made it 6-0 on the second of the season past the 12.5 minute mark, and then Calgary scored another last minute goal of the second period, as it was David Anuski, who scored his fourth just with 14 seconds left in the second period. So if you follow along, Calgary had a 7-0 lead after the second period. Third period, Moose Jaw did get on the board, as was Logan Doust, who scored his fifth just before the 10 minute mark. However, there was no more scoring to report in this one, so Calgary won this one 7-1, as Moose Jaw is much lower in the standings right now. Moose Jaw did actually outshoot Calgary 34-30 in this game. So who was led by the Calgary Hitmen? Obviously Sean Chagall, who had 2 goals, and David Asnewski had a goal and assist. And then it was Ryder Fielder Schultz. He actually chipped in with 4 assists, and Adam Kidd with 2 assists as well. So when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, Brandon Peters, who definitely is the number one goalie and the workhorse for the Calgary Hitmen, he made 33 saves, while it was Carl Chediak. He did make 10 saves for Moose Jaw in the first period. However, he got replaced by Jackson Unger, who took over the rest of the game and made 13 saves. So that was the summary for Game 19 against the Moose Jaw Warriors. So Game 20, this was the Teddy Bear Toss game. This happened on Saturday, December the 4th, as the Calgary Hitmen were hosting the Lethbridge Hurricanes. This was a 2 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. I actually went to the Spruce Meadows International Christmas Market instead that day, but I did get the gist of seeing people bringing their teddy bears to the game, and I'll talk about the game afterwards on the train. Well, actually, given this was the teddy bear toss game, Lethbridge was the team that came out strong and swinging. First goal of the game came past the 3-minute mark, as it was Noah Boyko who scored his 7th to make it 1-0 for Lethbridge at that point. 1-0 for Lethbridge at that point. Jackson Van Vliet took a double minor for high sticking, giving Lethbridge power play. 4-minute power play. This was at the 13.5-minute mark of the first period. And on that said power play was Noah Boyko, who scored his 2nd of the game, 2nd of the period, just before the 17.5-minute mark. So Lethbridge took a 2-0 lead. And that's how things stood after the first period. So we were still hanging on our teddy bears at this point in the game. Second period, I think Calgary came out with a better team and got on the board. Who scored the teddy bear goal for the Calgary Hitmen this year? Well, it was Cale Zimmerman who scored the teddy bear goal, his 6th of the season, just before the 7.5-minute mark to make it 2-1 for Lethbridge at that point. And the ultimate tally was 15,324 teddy bears. We were tossed at this game, so pretty good showing, all things considered. I know the record that the Calgary Hitmen had, which at the time was a world record, I think it was back in 2015, where we were just shy of 26,000 teddy bears. I know a couple years ago the record was Hershey Bears, fittingly, but in the American Hockey League, I think they tossed 31,000 bears a couple years ago. And then keep in mind that where the Hershey Bears play, their arena only holds 10,000 fans, while usually for the teddy bear toss game in Calgary, you get close to or a sellout full capacity for the sellout. Well, I'll tell you how many people did show up for this game at the end of it. So after all that, and the bears were tossed, Lethbridge did actually score a goal in the final minute of the second period, as it was Ty Nash. He's got his 6th of the season with 19 seconds to go in the second period. So Lethbridge took a 3-1 lead after the second period. Third period, Calgary kept up the strong play, looking to get back in this one. However, just before the 2.5-minute mark, it was Bilal Nouri who scored his first season to make it a 3-2 game for Lethbridge. However, just 16 seconds later, Lethbridge decided to regain the 2-goal lead, as it was Chait Wheatcross who scored his 4th, and now we had a 4-2 lead for Lethbridge. Chase Wheatcroft meant to say his name. Then Calgary had a power play, and Bilal Nouri who scored his 2nd of the game, 2nd of the period, at the 6-minute mark. So now we have a 4-3 game for Lethbridge. At that point, as the period winds down, Calgary kept pressing, looking for the equalizer. Ball the goalie, and this is one of those times that actually worked with a minute and a half left, as Calgary with the extra attacker did tie up the game, as it was Zach Funk who did score his 7th past the 18.5-minute mark. So shortly after, when we pulled the goalie for the extra attacker, we took advantage and scored. So it was a 4-4 game at that point, and you know what I'm going to say, with no more scoring? This one needs overtime. In overtime, only one shot was taken, and it was all of it needed. However, it was the Lethbridge Hurricanes that took that shot, as it was Ty Nash who scored his 2nd of the game at the 1:37-minute mark of the overtime. So ultimately, Lethbridge spoiled the teddy bear toss game with a 5-4 overtime victory. Overtime's definitely been something that's tripping up Calgary teams lately. Hitmen, Flames, the Stampeders from a few weeks ago in the playoffs. And ultimately in this game, while Lethbridge outshot Calgary 31-36, Clayton Lethbridge taking that one shot in overtime, which was the goal. So led the way for the Calgary Hitmen was Bilal Nouri, who had the 2 goals in the third period to get Calgary back in this one. And Oliver Tuck and David Anuski each had 2 assists. Lethbridge was led by Noah Boyko and Ty Nash, who each had a 2-goal, 1-assist game. When it comes to the goaltending story this game, Braden Peters made 32 saves for Calgary, while it was Brian Thompson who made 32 saves for Lethbridge. The attendance for this game was 13,028, so 6,000 short of a full capacity, but that's still tougher to get fuller capacities these days. All considered, I'll just leave it at that. But so nice to see that 15,000 teddy bears got tossed in this game after a couple of years where we're unable to do something like this. And of course, all the teddy bears go to children's charities at the Children's Hospital. So that was game 20. So game 21, this happened the next day on Sunday, February the 5th, as the Calgary Hitmen went up the road to take on the Red Deer Rebels at the PV Mart Centrium. This was a 4 p.m. puck drop, and first period, both sides still put up a play, but the only goal came late in the period. It was on Shigel for Calgary. Scored his 15th of the season just before the 19-minute mark, so very late in the first period. So Calgary took a 1-0 lead after the first period. Second period, Calgary came out as a better team and added a couple more goals. First was Cale Zimmerman, fresh off the Teddy Bear goal, scored in Red Deer, scored his 7th just past the opening minute to make it 2-0 for Calgary. And then Anton Yashishkin scored his 2nd just before the 6.5-minute mark, so Calgary had a 3-0 lead at that point. However, the Red Deer Rebels did come back a bit as they got on the board themselves, as was Jet Larson, who scored his 6th just before the 90-minute mark, and then Archie Baines, the leading scorer for the Rebels, scored his 10th just before the 12.5-minute mark, so now we have a 3-2 game for Calgary at that point in the second period. And then, actually that was it for the scoring for the second period, so Calgary had a 3-2 lead going into the third period after both teams having 2 goals each. Third period, Red Deer dominated into play as they outshot Calgary 12-2 in the third period alone. Red Deer did tie the game up at 3-3 as it was Jason Isley who scored his 3rd just past the 11-minute mark. Despite being outplayed, Calgary was able to hang on, and this one needs overtime. In overtime, both sides did have chances, but ultimately it was Red Deer who scored the overtime winner at the 4-minute mark, as it was Kay Usayas who scored his 8th, and Red Deer ultimately wins this one 4-3 in overtime. Red Deer outshot Calgary 33-24 in this one, including each side having 2-2 in overtime. Archie Baines, who led the game for Red Deer, had a goal and 2 assists. That was the only player that had a multi-point game on both sides. Goaltending started the game was Ethan Bonjour, who actually was in net for the Calgary, made 29 saves, while as Connor Unger, who made 21 saves for Red Deer. So that was game 21, and that was the first weekend in December. So game 22, this happened on Wednesday, December 8th, as the Calgary Hitmen were on the road. They were taking on the Lethbridge Hurricanes at the MX Center. This is the start of a 3-game road trip, as the Calgary Hitmen started in Lethbridge and then spent some time in Saskatoon for the weekend. Prince Albert and Saskatoon, is meant to say, in Saskatchewan. First period Calgary came out as a better team, as they got rewarded the goal, as it was Oliver Tulk who scored his 4th past the 13-minute mark, so Calgary took a 1-0 lead after the first period, so that was the only goal in the first period. Second period, things opened up for both sides and some physical play, as several coincidental penalties were dished out, but there was a lot to list, so I'll just say that. For goals, Calgary did make it 2-0. It was Oliver Tulk scored his 2nd of the game just before the 4.5-minute mark to make it 2-0. However, Lethbridge did get on the board as Jet Jones, who scored his 6th past the 14-minute mark. So we had a 2-1 game at that point, and that was after the second period, so Calgary led 2-1 at that point. Third period, Lethbridge had a slight edge in play, and ultimately they did tie this on up at 2-2, as it was Justin Hall who scored his 10th just past the 2-minute mark. After that, there was no more scoring report for the third straight game. I get to say this one needs overtime. In overtime, Calgary did have a few more chances, but no scoring, so this one needs a shootout. In the shootout, Calgary was up first, as it was Bilal Nouri who missed. However, so did Justin Hall for Lethbridge, so that was round 1. Round 2, Zach Funk missed for Calgary, but so did Chase Wheatcroft for Lethbridge. So now we get into the third and deciding round in the shootout. Third round, Rutherford shots missed for Calgary, leaving the chance for Logan Barlig to win it, and he actually did score in the shootout. So Lethbridge ultimately won this one 3-2 in the third round of the shootout. Calgary outshot Lethbridge 40-32 overall, including 3-1 in overtime. Who led the way in this game, while Oliver Tulk, he had 2 goals for Calgary. Goaltending story, Braden Peters made 30 saves for Calgary, while Brian Thompson, a little busier for Lethbridge, made 38 saves. So that was game 22 to start off the 3-game road trip. So game 23, this happened on Friday, December the 10th, as the Calgary Hitmen were on the road for their second game of the road trip as they were taking on the Saskatoon Blaze at the SaskTel Centre, 6 p.m. puck drop. Interesting, that was the day before that the Calgary Roughnecks were taking on the Saskatchewan Rush in the same arena. So first period, Calgary did have the slight edge in play and did score the first goal, as it was Adam Kidd who scored his third past the 11.5 minute mark. So Calgary had a 1-0 lead, but it was Kyle Shanovic for Saskatoon that tied it up on his 16th past the 17 minute mark. So that was 1-1 going late in the first period. However, Calgary did take the lead with a late goal in the first period, as it was Zach Spunk who scored his 8th of the season with 17 seconds to go in the first period. So after all that, Calgary ultimately had a 2-1 lead after the first period. Second period, Saskatoon did tie it up the game at 2-2, as it was Brandon Lelowski who scored his 13th just before the 12.5 minute mark. So there was no more score in the report after that. So we had a 2-2 game going into the third period. Third period game remained 2-2 heading into the final minutes. However, Calgary was able to score the go-ahead goal. Zach Funk, who scored his second of the game past the 15.5 minute mark. So now Calgary took a 3-2 lead. At that point, when with Saskatoon ultimately pulling the goalie for the extra attacker in the final minute, it was ultimately Riley Fitter-Schultz who put it in the empty net on his 12th of the season with 38 seconds to go. So Calgary ultimately takes this one 4-2 in Saskatoon. Calgary also shot Saskatoon 31-26. Led the way for Calgary was Zach Funk. He had 2 goals, and then Sean Chagall had 2 assists. On the Saskatoon Blades side of the puck, it was Kyle Shanovic who had a goal and assist. Goaltending story for this game, Brady Peters made 23 saves for Calgary, while it was Nolan Mayer who made 27 saves for Saskatoon. So now the last game for this episode that we'll talk about recap. This was game 24. This happened on Saturday, December 11th, as the Calgary Hitmen went a little more north in Saskatchewan as they were taking on the Prince Albert Raiders. This was a 6 p.m. puck drop at the Art Hauser Centre to wrap up this 3-game road trip. Both sides had a slow start and had a defensive period. However, there were still 3 goals that were produced in the first period. First goal of the game did go to the Prince Albert Raiders. It was Cale Saunders who scored his 6th past the 4-minute mark. So Prince Albert took a fairly early 1-0 lead. Calgary did tie it up at 1-1 as Riley Fitter-Schultz scored his 13th at the 7-minute mark. However, ultimately, it was Prince Albert that did score again, as there was Reese Vitelli who scored his 9th just before the 10-minute mark. So Prince Albert led 2-1 at that point, and that's actually how things stood after the first period, with the Prince Albert Raiders leading 2-1. Second period, Calgary Hitmen did outplay Prince Albert and did score 2 goals early in the second period. First was Oliver Tulk, who scored his 6th past the 2.5 minute mark to tie it up at 2-2. Then Calgary took the lead, as it was Keegan Slaney who scored his 2nd just past the 5-minute mark. So Calgary, fairly early in the second period, now have a 3-2 lead. There was no more scoring to report, so it was 3-2 Calgary going into the third period. Third period player opened up on both sides, and Prince Albert was looking for the equalizer. Prince Albert actually tied it up at 3-3, as it was Keaton Sorensen who scored his 5th past the 11.5 minute mark. So with a 3-3 tie, no more scoring to report in this one. This one needs overtime. Had to say that a lot in this episode. However, there was no scoring to report in overtime, so this one needs a shootout. So going into the shootout, I guess in the WHL, I guess the visitors must be up first. So Calgary was up first, as Cale Zimmerman missed on his shot, but so did Sloan Stanek for Prince Albert. So that was round 1. Round 2, it was Adam Kidd who missed for the Calgary Hitmen. However, it was Ozzy Weisblatt who scored for the Prince Albert Raiders in the second round. Third round only showed Prince Albert scored, as it was Landon Kozer to clinch it. So I guess they must have been up first in the third round. So that was it, as the Prince Albert Raiders won this one 3-2 in a shootout. So Calgary outshot Prince Albert 31-25 including 4-2 for Prince Albert in overtime. So Prince Albert had a few more chances in overtime. So led the way for Calgary was Keegan Slaney, who had a goal and assist, and then Cale Saunders and Keaton Sorensen each had a goal and assist for the Prince Albert Raiders. So when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, it was Ethan Bonaventura, who made 22 saves for Calgary, while it was Tikon Cheka, who made 28 saves for Prince Albert. So where did the Calgary Hitmen sit after 24 games? Well, they have 11 wins, 9 losses, 2 overtime, 2 shootout losses for 26 points, which puts them third in the Central. So that's the quick standings. But let's touch on the drafts before we look at the stats and standings again for both sides. So for the drafts, there was a USAHL or US priority draft, as the Calgary Hitmen picked 2 Americans. I have the links in the description for both drafts so you can read up more on the players. I'll just fire off where the players were drafted. So for the U.S. priority draft, and these are players that if they didn't get picked in that draft, they go in the process draft. Well, Calgary drafted a forward in Adrian Park and defenseman in Will Scahan. So those are the 2 Americans that the Calgary Hitmen drafted to put in their pipeline. Now for the actual prospects draft, I know that earlier in the previous episodes, some of the trades that the Calgary Hitmen made were to pick up some draft picks in this prospects draft. So the first round, 12th overall, the Calgary Hitmen selected a right winger in Carson West, which I actually saw he did sign with the team, so at least we have him in the pipeline. Then round 3, 58th overall, we drafted a center in Chase Elliott. And then in the 4th round, the Calgary Hitmen 80th overall selected forward Ethan Marner. I think the 2nd round pick was part of the Jet Wu trade that the Calgary Hitmen made a couple years ago. And then we had 2 5th round picks. The first of the 5th round picks, 102nd overall, was defenseman Jalen Ashby. And then the 2nd 5th round pick was the 105th overall and defenseman Jack Birch. I know we traded Luke Prokop and Tristan Zandy earlier this season for a few picks in this draft. So now in the 6th round, we had 2 6th round picks back to back, which the first one was 123rd overall. The Calgary Hitmen drafted goaltender Christian Francis. Then the next pick, 124th overall in the 6th round, they drafted forward Dryden Kuramato. And then now go into the last 3 picks. I think they were their own picks, 7th, 8th, and 9th. So in the 7th round, 146th overall, Calgary Hitmen drafted Kaber Shahi, I should meant to say. 8th round, 168th overall, the Calgary Hitmen drafted forward Alan Chirpa. And then the last pick for the prospects draft for the Calgary Hitmen, 9th round, 178th overall, is Kellan Henderlini. So those are the 10 players that the Calgary Hitmen selected in the prospects draft, plus the 2 Americans in the U.S. priority draft. So you can look at the links in the description below to read up more about these players. These are all teenagers. Keep in mind that they're 13, 14 years old, and tells you how much time has gone by. We're looking at players that were born in like 2005, 2006. Man, I'm getting old. So now if we take a look at the stats and standings before we move on to other business to look ahead what the next 6 games will be for the Calgary Hitmen. So right now, leading the team in scoring for the Calgary Hitmen is Friedrich Schultz. After 24 games, he has 13 goals, 21 assists for 34 points. And then second is Sean Chigel. In 24 games, he has 15 goals, which leads the team in scoring, 14 assists and 29 points. And then Zach Funk is third in scoring. After 24 games, he has 9 goals, 8 assists for 17 points. 4th place is Adam Kidd. In 24 games, he has 3 goals, 14 assists for 17 points. And then rounding out the top 5 is Cale Zimmerman. In 21 games, he has 7 goals, 4 assists for 11 points. So that's just a quick top 5 in scoring. So when it comes to the goaltending story of the Calgary Hitmen, well, Brady Peters is definitely the workhorse. He had played in 21 games. He has a record of 10 wins, 9 losses, one overtime and shootout loss each. He has a 296 save percentage and a 906 save percentage. A 296 goals against average and 906 save percentage with 2 shutouts, so it's pretty good for junior hockey. And now for Ethan Bonaventura, he has played in 4 games. He has 1 win, no losses, 1 overtime and 1 shootout loss. He has a 282 goals against average and a .897 save percentage. So actually Calgary's goaltending has looked a little better in recent episodes. So now let's take a look at the standings. Let's look around the league. Starting off in the Western Conference, we'll just fire off points in the number of games. So in the West Division, the Everett Silvertips are still leading the way after 26 games. They have 40 points. Well, they have a 19-5, 1-1 record. So the Everett Silvertips are running away with the West Division. Second place is the Seattle Thunderbirds. After 25 games, they have 35 points. Third place is the Portland Winterhawks. After 25 games, they have 26 points. Fourth place is the Tri-City Americans. 22 games, they have 17 points, and they're rounding out the West Division is the Spokane Chiefs. In 23 games, they have 15 points. So now if we go to the BC Division in the Western Conference, the Kamloops Blazers are leading the way. They have 36 points in 24 games. Second place is the Vancouver Giants. They have 27 points in 24 games. Third place is the Kelowna Rockets. They have 25 points in 23 games. Fourth place is the Prince George Cougars. They have 20 points in 24 games. And rounding out the BC Division is the Victoria Royals. They have 19 points in 22 games. So that is the Western Hockey League in the Western Conference. So now if we move over to the Central Division, leading the Central Division, where the Calgary Hitmen are, is the Edmonton Oil Kings. After 28 games, they have 41 points. Well, they got 19 wins, 6 losses, 2 overtime losses, and 1 shield loss. Sometimes if a record looks big enough, I'll share the record. Second place is the Red Deer Rebels. They have 36 points in 28 games, and then the Calgary Hitmen, 26 points in 24 games. Fourth place is the Swift Current Broncos. They have 25 points, but they played 27 games. Fifth place is the Lethbridge Hurricanes. They got 22 points in 23 games. And the Medicine Hat Tigers round up the Central Division. They have 14 points in 25 games. A full WHL season is 68 games, so we're about a third of the way there right now. Now in the last division, which is the East Division, and the cream of the crop is still the Winnipeg Ice. They have 47 points in 27 games. Winnipeg is 23-3-1-0. Kind of like the Blue Bombers in a way. And then second place in the East Division, well, it's the Brendan Wheat Kings. They are a distant second with 29 points in 28 games. Then third place is the Moose Jaw Warriors. They had 28 points in 28 games. Fourth place is the Saskatoon Blades. They had 27 points in 25 games. Fifth place is the Regina Pats. They had 22 points in 26 games. And rounding out the East Division is Prince Albert Raiders. They had 22 points in 25 games. So you got a 7-point spread for second place in the East Division. But I think they got everyone in the East are getting spanked by Winnipeg. And I think Winnipeg is one of the top teams in the CHL right now. So that's the quick standings and stats for the Calgary Hitmen and this episode. I'll just clean up my notifications here. So now in this part of the episode, let's take a look ahead to the next 6 games, which will be the next episode, and literally it will take us into the new year. As the next 6 games, 25-30 for the next episode. Well, the next game for the Calgary Hitmen will be game 25. This will be on Wednesday, December the 15th. As the Calgary Hitmen are back at home, as the Lava Bell, Alberta, as the Hitmen will be taking on the Edmonton Oil Kings. That'll be 7 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. The game 26 will be on Friday, December the 17th. As the Calgary Hitmen will be up the road, they'll be taking on the Red Deer Rebels at the PB Mart Centrium, 7 p.m. puck drop, which is a good thing because the Saddledome is going to be hosting the Calgary Roughnecks home opener that night. And they haven't found a way to have lacrosse and hockey played at the same time, so I guess the Hitmen are on the road. However, on Sunday, December the 19th, the Calgary Hitmen will be back at home, taking on the Red Deer Rebels. That will be a 2 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome, and that's the last game before Christmas. And then game 28 On Tuesday, December 28th, the Calgary Hitmen will be at home. They'll be taking on the Medicine Hat Tigers. That'll be a 7 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. And then game 29, this will be on Thursday, December 30th, as the Calgary Hitmen will be on the road taking on the Medicine Hat Tigers. This will be at Co-op Place at a 7 p.m. puck drop. And then game 30, this will happen on New Year's Day on Saturday, January the 1st, as the Calgary Hitmen will be at home taking on the Lethbridge Hurricanes. That'll be at 2 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. So maybe some junior hockey will let you nurse your New Year's hangover. But that is what I have for looking ahead for the next 6 games for the Calgary Hitmen. So that is this episode for my Calgary Hitmen in 6. It seems like it's a Calgary sports thing that we seem to have trouble in overtime. As the Flames have struggled with it, the Hitmen have, and then my Calgary Stampeders lost a heartbreaker in overtime. However, I think that is nothing compared to the Hamilton Tiger Cats when it comes to overtime and the Grey Cup after recording this. So anyway, I'd like to close out. If you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans' journey, home of the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, recapping games and stories and anything else in between. But I also do a variety of non-sports content, like personal vlogs, attempt to comedy, and I also do share experience today I'm on the road or at a sporting event. And I've done some vlogging on the go, so if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, do follow along with this Calgary sports fans' journey. You know you do, just make sure you hit like and subscribe. I also have my other social media links down in the description below, and make sure you subscribe to my second channel in Brett Hornby Shorts, where exclusively on that channel I post my short form content for YouTube Shorts. So I appreciate the like and subscribe on my second channel, as well as right here on my main channel. So I'm going to say, let's go Hitmen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.